Welcome to Families Reimagined. This is a video series that will be going along with the teaching series here at the venues that we're doing in February and March of 2025 called Families, Am I Right? I'm Chris, and I'll be the host for each of the episodes that we're doing. And we'd highly encourage you to check out the full teaching series online at thevenues.org/messages. Today, we are joined by Bob Horton, and I am really excited to have you here with us to kind of share a little bit about your story, for us to all kind of get to know a little bit about you and maybe to see a little bit of ourselves in your story. Now, I do want to tell you all, by the way, don't worry. This isn't some kind of like really churchy thing. This isn't a sermon or anything like that. It's merely a resource that we are looking to bring to people so that you can kind of see people who have gone through family changes and hoping through that to provide some really concrete and practical steps that we might all want to think about. Today, we're diving into a question that is really complicated for a lot of people. And it's something that I know a lot of people kind of think about. And it's this question: how do you come out to your family? I know that if you look this up online, if you try to figure out like, how do I come out to my family? There are a lot of resources out there, and some of them are really good and very helpful. Some are logical. And then it seems like, especially in the church space, there's a lot that aren't. They're really maybe even problematic. And so our goal here is to provide both a face of someone who has gone through this process and also to provide some really helpful, like very practical, concrete steps for people that are maybe some tips for you if you're going to be in the process of telling your family that you are a part of the queer community. So Bob, before we jump too deeply into this, I'd like to take just a minute and kind of let the community who's watching get to know a little bit about you. So can you just share with us maybe your name and a little bit about your coming out story? Like, who did you tell? How did the process go? And can you kind of give us some details on that?
Sure. Thank you, Chris, for inviting me here.
Sure.
So I came out about 2.5 years ago, and it was, very tough for me. I was 64 years old, had lived a single life, and it was coming out month. It was June when I did it. And I just decided that I needed to be the true me. So I decided that I was going to put it on Facebook, jump right in.
Wow.
And I think the reason I hadn't come out before was not knowing the reaction that I would get, mainly from my family. So the day that I had written it to go out on Facebook, I had called my brother, who is 6 years older than I was, or than I am. And I had called him and I said, I just want to tell you something. I want to tell you two things. One, that I'm a 64-year-old gay man, and two, that I'm coming out on Facebook. There was this silence on the phone. And I thought, what have I done? But in that conversation, my brother said to me, I will tell you two things. What you just told me does not at all affect how much I love you. And two, I had a 95% idea that that was the case. To get that acceptance from one of my family members that I was really struggling coming out to was just such a relief. And Chris, that night, I got probably the best night's sleep that I have had in 4 or 5 years.
Oh my goodness. That's such a touching story, Bob. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate your brother's response there too. One of the things that you said there is you were talking about how you how you were going to be sharing it on Facebook. And I know, because I see your Facebook posts regularly, that one of the other things that you do post quite regularly has to do with your faith. How did those two things interact? Like, how did you put together your faith? Or like, how has your faith helped inform you living into who you truly are, Bob?
God is so important in my life. I realize, how much he means to me, how much, that is still as strong as it was before I came out.
Right.
So, but I do think it provided me strength. At my last church, every one of them came out and said, we love you the way you are. That reinforced A, that I did the right thing, and B, that God is with me even in this journey. Having the strength from God to come out was a big part of this too.
One thing you said there that I think is really important is that as we're kind of thinking about this whole discussion, we do want to remind everyone that there are no two coming out stories that are exactly the same, that everyone has different experiences. And whether you came out the way you did or whether someone else does or doesn't come out, I just kind of want to take a second and just remind people that, you might be a queer person who never comes out. And you're just as valid and just as queer. And what you might do today is you might just tell the video. You might send an anonymous message to us here at the venues. We've got a text number that'll be at the end of the video. Or you might be fully out and have the ability to tell everyone that you know, listen to you. And all of those are equally valid and wonderful. This video is not designed to be like, you have to do it exactly this way, because everyone's journey is different. Rather, our goal is just a series of thoughts that might be some practical tips in a similar way to the fact that you went through some like steps, 1, 2, 3, etc. And that seems to kind of have been something that was helpful for you. And we would like to make that same opportunity available to people who are watching this. Most people that I have seen suggest basically 4 practices. And so if it's okay with you, what I'd like to do is maybe talk through each of these and see if they were things that you did, if they were things that you had maybe wished that you did, if they were things that maybe you completely disagree with. And by the way, that's perfectly fine. These are not like set in stone. The first one is you should be prepared, which would include things like playing the conversation out in your head a little bit and thinking about the things that someone else might ask you questions about or how they might respond to them. Is this something that you did? Like before you called your brother, did you kind of play out in your mind how the conversation would go, or did you just kind of enter it into it cold, or how did that play out for you, Bob?
I played it in my mind, the different scenarios. What if he would say this, or what if he would say that? But not really knowing, how it was going to be. I had told my sister, she knew, all this, she loves me the way I am. I think she felt when the time was right, I should, tell my brother. I just wish I could have told my mother when she was alive. I think my mother would have been so accepting. That's one thing I regret is not telling her.
Yeah.
And so I felt I was prepared because I have other friends that I told before and they knew and they couldn't believe I have lived with this for so long without being able to come out and say who I am.
But I just want to tell you, I am so proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah. One of the things that you shared there, and this is kind of the second step that many people suggest, is that it sometimes is better or easier if you first share with an ally, like someone that you know is going to be supportive. You talked about your church friends. You talked about your sister who can kind of build that confidence for those later conversations. Do you think that it was helpful for you to have started with people that you knew were going to be supportive, people like your church friends or your sister who you knew ahead of time, or at least you thought ahead of time, were going to be supportive, carte blanche?
I think it was maybe easier in that you sort of rehearsed it. You rehearsed what you were going to say. When you have what they call Catholic guilt, you were, the nuns in schools, shamed you into doing things.
Yeah.
And my fear in that people would not be accepting was probably one of the biggest reasons I had not done it.
Oh, well, sure.
I knew that people had a good idea, that I was gay. To say those words from the fact of wondering what other people are going to do or say. I know the next time I went to my old church, they had asked me to MC an event. I have never been showered with love like I was then. We had a family reunion maybe 4 weeks after I came out. The love that my family shared with me was just phenomenal. I wish I would have done it sooner, but I realize why I didn't. So, I've just come to accept that.
Right.
Yeah, I have been fortunate. I mean, I was fortunate that, most everybody was very accepting and very loving. And like I said, it was a relief. And now I'm proud to, to say that.
That's awesome. I'm so excited. A third step that many people find is to be very intentional about the way that you're going to do it. Like maybe plan a place that you're comfortable, like do it at your house or do it on the phone if it's not necessarily a comfortable space for you. And so I wonder, when you were saying earlier that when you came out to your brother, you decided to step away from work, you went outside so that you wouldn't cry if that was going to be the case. How far in advance or how did that process go for you planning how you were going to do that? How did you decide that you were going to come out on Facebook? How did you decide that you were going to come out to your brother? How did those things happen?
Well, the thing on Facebook is I saw someone else come out on Facebook. And then I got to thinking about, should I do this? Do I need to do this? And, I struggle every day mentally with my mental health. But I realized before then I was struggling, I think because I hadn't come out. It was bottled up inside of me. I get too emotional. As you can tell, I get very emotional. I think of myself as a fairly good writer, so I can, write the things as well as I can say the things. And to prepare me for my brother, I worked with a lesbian and I told her what I was going to do. And she was like, "You're going to do what?" And I said, "I'm going to come out on Facebook." Yeah. I said, "But I really feel I owe it to my brother to call and tell him." I did not want him to read that on Facebook and not know that it was happening. But I had other nieces and nephews and cousins and aunts and uncles, and every one of them, it was so positive, the comments. So even though I wasn't intentional and calling them ahead of time, I pretty well knew, I hoped that I would get the reaction that I did.
That's so great. And I'm really thankful that you had that experience as well with your family, the way that they were responsive back to that. I know that a lot of people worry about how certain people are going to be responsive. And so that's actually kind of the fourth thing that is kind of a practical step for some people, having your suitcase packed, kind of like the escape bag. And it seems like from what you've said that your experience was mostly positive. But would you recommend for people as they are coming out that they maybe have an escape plan just in case it doesn't go well? Because taking care of yourself, you're being incredibly vulnerable. And there's a chance that someone might say you are not valuable. You're not loved in this instance, which is devastating. And so, did you have any kind of an escape plan or any kind of a suitcase pack just in case it didn't go well? And I know it's a little different if you're talking with someone over the phone, but did you have any kind of here's what I'm going to do if it doesn't go well plan?
I really didn't.
Yeah.
It was going to be how it was. And for me, they were going to accept me for who I am, or maybe we weren't the friends that we needed to be.
Oh, yeah.
I had decided that I wasn't going to lead a closeted life anymore. Therefore, you have two choices. You can like me for who I am, or we can not be friends. I think coming out is a personal journey, and it's how that person decides to come out should and will be up to them.
Absolutely. And the important thing in all of that is like you said earlier, you waited a little while. Other people were like, yeah, we've kind of anticipated that this would happen, but you waited until it was safe for you. And that's one of the things that we just want to always share with our friends who are maybe watching this, processing through this, is you taking care of yourself, talking to people who will be safe, who will be allies, and preparing yourself, whether that is with a suitcase packed or with having friends who are ready to go at a moment's notice or whatever. I really appreciate the fact that like you waited until it was good for you, because it happened on your timeline.
Yeah. And I tell you, I had 2 nieces afterwards come to me and say, I've got a church that you should go to if you want to feel loved. And it was this church right here.
Really? That's
yeah.
amazing.
And so they came with me that first Sunday. And to be a part of a church that is accepting is a huge step for people too. And loving people the way God wants us to love people, that is what is so exciting for a church like this.
Yeah. It's us fully being ourselves, loving each other as they fully are themselves. And honestly, Bob, I appreciate you bringing your energy to this. I appreciate you bringing your vulnerability to this. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you if there's any other advice that you would have for people, whether it's about the process, how you wish others would respond when someone comes out, or honestly, Bob, I think you're a very wise person. Just any advice that you would give to anyone in general.
I would say reach out to somebody and talk to them about it. I mean, they are more than welcome to call me and, talk to me about, them coming out. We're all in this together, whether we're straight or gay, we're all in this to love each other in a world where there is so much political divisiveness that we need to have friends to talk to. We need to have friends to have listened to what you have to say.
Absolutely.
Even if it's just to have them listen. From my perspective, I had people that just listened, and that was as important as them being part of the conversation.
I need to process that a little bit myself, but I think what you said there of just saying like sometimes we are so apt to want to jump in and insert ourselves into it, but sometimes just listening when someone says, I've got this story, is the best way that we can show allyship, that we can show friendship, that we can show kinship, that we can show togetherness, that we can show love, is just by listening. And maybe also for people who are on the receiving end, that sometimes you don't have to insert yourself. You can just be the person who listens.
When I did it, it was like, okay, this is about me deciding to do what I felt I needed to do, and both physically and mentally I needed to do. It was good to have just that person to listen. People have good intentions for the most part. And I think a person coming out has got to realize they can't do it on their own.
Well, Bob, I want to thank you so much. And I also want to thank those of you who have been joining us online to watch this video. We'll be doing a series of these. There'll be a total of 5 collectively. And over the next several weeks, we'll be talking to several different individuals. We'll be talking to an interfaith couple. We'll be talking to a professional therapist. And we're also going to be talking to Pastor Philip, who'll be joining us not as Pastor Philip, but rather as a father, talking about what it's like to work as you have relationships with your adult children. And so we really appreciate that. If you have any questions, by the way, you can either post them here on YouTube or on Facebook, or you can send us an email at info@thevenues.org, or you can send us a text at 833-293-3092. And we'd be happy to get back in contact with you. Thank you so much. I hope that you all have a great day.